Hey guys, welcome to another Writer's Coffee Break session. My name is Bonnie Caton. I'm a staff writer here at AWAI, and I'm with Rachel Mazza. It's Mazza, right?
Yep, you got it in one.
All right, awesome. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. This is fun.
I know, we're so glad to have you. So let me see if I get this right. I'm just going to tell everybody a little bit about you.
Sounds good.
You started in this field through marketing as a freelancer, right?
Yep.
And when you were doing that, you traveled the world and you were able to work as a freelance marketer and travel around.
Yep. So yeah, I basically was always looking for someone to pay me to travel around the world. So as a teenager, I was like, how can I do that? And I was like, oh, I'll be an actor. People pay actors to travel around the world, or I'll be an animal trainer, or I was looking for anything. And I actually just started traveling first and then stumbled upon marketing as something that you could do while working from anywhere. So it worked out.
Wow. I love that. You're like, I saw on your website that you're like, I had a brief stint as a tiger trainer, and I was going to ask you about that because I was like, what's harder, copywriting or tiger training?
Oh man, I don't know. Those skeptical audiences can be a bear. So
yeah. So that's awesome. So that's how you got your start in marketing, and you were traveling around a lot. And then I see that you started your own digital marketing agency in 2012 as well.
Yes. Yep. So I had been freelancing and ended up kind of falling into this niche that worked really well and I understood really well. So I started a whole copywriting agency around it at that time. And yeah, it just grew really fast.
That's awesome. And so now today you've like totally niched down, right? And your focus is 100% on sales funnels and direct sales copywriting. So do you still have your agency, or are you doing that on a freelance basis now?
No. So actually I learned so many lessons growing that agency, and it grew really fast. And one of the biggest lessons I learned is that I don't love running an agency. So I actually shut down the agency. That's actually when I met Kevin Rogers from Copy Chief and hired him as my coach and my business mentor. And through that, I learned that the agency was just like kind of toxic for me because I didn't love running it. So it was a very big choice for me at the time to shut down a profitable business, but I made the choice to close the doors and relaunch as a full-time freelancer and work one-on-one with clients again. And that was a huge change for me, but I'm so glad. I would never, ever go back. It's been great.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. I mean, it's really good to know too, that there's so many different ways you can go about this. You can start up an entire agency. You can just be your own agent. Like, that's awesome. And so you also teach now as well, and have a podcast.
I do. So yeah, we do a lot of what we're doing here is we teach writers how to make great money with their writing skills. And so I partner with another writer, Laura Gale, and she's a ghostwriter. And so it's great because she has a much more like love of the craft approach, where I'm a copywriter and I'm like, oh, let's talk about the tactics. And so it's great. We're a good balance on the show, talking to all kinds of writers about how to build a great writing business.
Awesome. And that is called the Business of Writing Podcast, right? People can find you at businessofwritingpodcast.com.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So that's just you in a nutshell. I'm sure there's so much more to you, but on the copywriting side, that's like you in a nutshell. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit today about your specialty, right? Which is, you say on your website, lowering traffic costs by warming up cold traffic, and doing that with sales funnels.
Right.
So before I ask you kind of a little bit more about how you got into doing that, can you explain for people here who may not know what exactly is a sales funnel?
Yeah, definitely. So a sales funnel is just how you bring new customers and new people into your world. So if you're a business owner and you have a product to sell, you need to tell people about it. You need to get people interested about it, and you need to bring them into your world so that they want to hear from you. So a sales funnel is how we talk about it. It's like a funnel, right? And all of people go in the top and only the best people come out the bottom. And so usually you've got what we call top of the funnel content, and that's where everyone's going in. So that's going to be like your blog articles and anything that's talking to a wide range of people, just trying to catch as many people as you can to the top. And then you've got middle of the funnel content, which is more for qualifying people. So that's kind of getting rid of the people that might not be a good fit for your business. And then bottom of the funnel content is where copywriters might, like me, live. And that's where you've got the best prospects. They're sitting in front of you. And now you've just got to convince them and persuade them that it's time to buy your product.
The conversion part.
the conversion part. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So I just want to dig into a couple of things that you've said on your website, because I think these will be really helpful for everybody listening. So you say that you've been using stories to help business owners increase those conversions since you started, with your marketing agency. So can you tell me a little bit about, first of all, what drew you to copywriting? Was it the ability to use story? And secondly, how do you use story to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was drawn to copywriting because I've always been involved in marketing in one way or another. I mean, my mom was a very serious Avon lady, and I grew up with direct sales in the house and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I learned that my whole life. And I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, I took a copywriting course and realized that all the things that I did naturally in my writing to get people to take action and persuade people, those had names and there was a strategy behind them. And so I feel like I've been copywriting my whole life, but I really studied the craft about 5-6 years ago is when I really got into it.
Okay.
And I really liked the idea that words could be so powerful. So we joke in the copywriting world that use your copywriting powers for good, not evil, because you truly have this power to persuade people and get them to take a specific action. And so I think I just found that interesting. It was always like a puzzle trying to break down the human psyche and what makes people tick and why they do things, and then try and use that to give them something that's really going to help them solve a major problem in their life. That's really cool. It's like this crazy puzzle of humanity that you're figuring out just by using stories and the right words.
Yeah, that's cool. I'd love to know too a little bit more. I won't ask you now, but maybe in a future session we can ask you what you learned from your mom as an Avon lady, because that's wow, that's like school of direct sales right there.
Yeah.
So how did you end up specializing in sales funnels specifically?
Sure. So I have written copy for all across the sales funnel, like top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, everything. There's a long sales page that you think nobody reads, but actually work really well, all those things. And so what I do now is I really focus on what I call the pre-sale part of the sales funnel. And so that's right before your customer is ready to buy, but before you're showing them your sales message. And so the reason I like this pre-sale funnel area is because it takes cold readers, which are really hard to get in contact with and get them to listen to you and raise their hand and say, I want what you have and I want to hear what you have to say. Because cold readers are people that may not know about you or don't care about you, people that you're trying to bring into your world, right? And so I like approaching these cold readers and then changing them into warm readers, because that allows you to present your sales message in a way that will be heard and understood and accepted. And so if you can figure out that tough to crack part of the sales funnel, that's extremely valuable for business owners, because it allows you to reach more people than just the people that have already bought from you or already said, hey, I want what you have. So I focus on that pre-sale funnel. And the way that we do that is we use stories and copy that makes a personal connection with the reader to get them to raise their hand and say, okay, I want to hear more about what you have. Show me what's next. And so it puts them in the right mindset to buy, to hear what you have to say before you ever show them your sales message.
And do you specialize in any specific niche when you're doing that? Or is this do you teach people how to do this just across the board in pretty much anything?
That's what was really interesting about the agency is we wrote hundreds of pages across dozens of niches because we had such a large team, and the people that we were working for could test so well. We were able to test across all these different niches. So I don't write in a particular niche. I have in the past. I've definitely been the health copywriter, and I've worked with SaaS companies quite extensively, which is software as a service. But right now, I don't focus on a particular vertical or industry as much as a piece of the funnel, which is that part that approaches cold traffic.
Okay, cool. So what is, now that you teach people, you have a podcast, you've been doing this for such a long time, what is a main mistake that copywriters or that business owners trying to write their own copy make when they're putting together a sales funnel?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is trying to sell too early or too hard. And so we've all seen those ads that it sounds like someone's in your head going like Sunday, 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 right? It sounds just like spammy and salesy. And what's crazy is that's not a bad advertisement. It's just not meant for you. right? So I think what people do is they try to sell too hard to too many people, like to everyone, instead of focusing on what we in marketing call the buyer's awareness scale.
Right.
And so if you haven't run into this concept before, it's a concept from an awesome book called Breakthrough Advertising. There's another book that dives into it called Great Leads, both amazing books to read if you want to learn about approaching people for the first time in your marketing. And the buyer's awareness scale just talks about where people are at on this scale of awareness of trying to solve their problem with products like yours. So they may be unaware that they even have a problem in the first place, or at the highest level of the awareness scale, they know that they have a problem. They've explored solutions. They know about you. They may even know your prices, and they're just ready to hear a really good deal or a guarantee, and they're ready to buy, right?
Yeah.
So what we want to do is take those people that are more unaware, and that's those colder audiences, and move them towards that most aware stage on the buyer's awareness scale where they're ready to buy. And that way we just have to say like, hey, we've got the best deal. Here you go. Pull the trigger. And so I think what a lot of business owners do is they try and talk to the people in that unawareness scale, and they just try and throw the sales messages at them when those people may not be ready to hear them. They may just need to know more information about their problem at that point. And they don't want to hear about your stuff. They want to hear about them. And so I think that's the biggest mistake, is just not taking the time to understand where your customer is at on that scale before trying to decide the information you're going to give them.
Yeah. And do you think, like, as a copywriter coming in with a new client, as a lot of people here might be just getting started with their first clients, or they've got a brand new client that they are working on. If you've got a client that wants you to write a sales funnel for them, what are the first few questions you're going to ask that client?
So if you have a client that wants you to write a sales funnel for them, I would definitely want to know what they've put out already and what they've tried in the past. And how that worked, of course, because that'll give me an idea of who they're talking to. But also you want to ask about the customer. I mean, clients, it's surprisingly, a lot of times they have no idea who we call their avatar or their customer is. So you want to do what you can to find out who the best person to talk to is. Because another big mistake is that they try to sell to everyone, right? And in marketing, we know that the more specific you can get about who you're talking to, the more success you're going to have, because you're going to be able to speak to their specific needs and pain points and desires and stuff. So I would say the first questions are about what have you done, and then who are you talking to?
Yeah. And if they don't really know very well what their client is like or who they are, how do you get around that?
Yeah. And that's a really good point, Bonnie, because a lot of clients don't know. It's the same thing when you're pitching a potential client and you say, oh, what's your budget for copywriting? They don't know. Nobody knows what their budget is. They're like, tell me what it costs and I'll tell you if I can afford it. Yeah. So it's the same thing. A lot of times clients don't know their avatar profile. And so then you, as the copywriter, it's your job to go find that out. So the way I would approach that is I would try and get as much information from the client as I could. Like, okay, can you give me a list of your previous buyers, and do you have any data on that? Like, do you know if they're male or female, or where they live, or like what kind of income bracket they're in? And you try and get that really basic demographic data so that you can start piecing together a picture. And then what I do is I go try and look in whether it's like Facebook groups or online groups or even in person. Before the pandemic thing, you could actually like go hang out with people at meetups, right? And so like try and find out where those kinds of people hang out and work, and just listen to the conversations they're having. And that's going to inform what you write about when you talk to them.
So be a little spy and go hang out with them.
Cool. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
For me, at least.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're a people person or you like people in general, just like getting to know those people. Have you found a way to do that in the space that we're in right now, in this pandemic world that we're in? Like, how would you actually go about learning about the client if you can't go to meetups and be around them in person?
Yeah. So dialogue is everything. And so you just have to figure out how to have that dialogue. So fortunately, a lot of times if you're working with a business owner that's quite established, they'll have a list of people, right? An email list of people. And so I would want to go straight to those people and have either some sort of survey, or there's a great tactic that Dean Jackson, the marketer Dean Jackson, talks about. He calls this 9-word email, where you literally send out a 9-word email, just like asking like, hey, what do you think about this? Or are you still interested in this? And you can get a lot of dialogue back just by asking open-ended questions to your list. To me, that's the best way, because those are the people that you they already know you and they're willing to have a conversation with you. But if you can't have that, or you don't have a list, then you just go out into the internet and try and find places that would emulate getting together, right? So Facebook groups, Reddit is like a maze of trolls, but still some great information in there. There's a lot of like specific forums. I also love, if we're getting super specific, there's a plugin for your Chrome browser called Discussions, and it allows you to search for words. Like, I like to use emotional words, so I would search for like weight loss plus frustrated, and then you click on this Discussions button, and it shows you on your search, on your Google search, all of the forums and discussions and comments. And so it brings you into like the discussion part of the internet, where people are actually chatting about those terms that you've found. It's super cool.
That's a really great tip. It's an extension, a Chrome extension.
A Chrome extension it's just called Discussion. So if you Google Discussions Chrome extension, it just goes right onto your browser. And then what you do is you just search on Google normally. And you know how it says like news, images, shopping at the top of Google? You'll actually have a Discussions tab there now. And you can just go straight to all the discussions about what you're searching for.
That's a great tip.
It's pretty cool.
Using that. I've never heard of that before.
Awesome.
So speaking of the pandemic and everything that's going on right now, since we're in this, we have to ask you about this. Has anything about the messaging within sales funnels changed for you and for your clients during the pandemic? And are you giving your consulting clients any new advice right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's like everything has shifted so much since the beginning of this whole thing and now. And one thing I saw at the beginning was just that people were so tone deaf. It's like if this was like crazy and people were like afraid and they had no idea what was going on, at the very beginning, it was like, if you remember, it was like so much worse, right? And it seemed so much worse and so dire. And so if you were sending out emails that were like, first of all, if they were about like a concert or an event or something, and you didn't address that, like what was going on, then people are going to be like, are you just completely under a rock or something like that? But also, if you sent out messages that were just sales messages and you weren't addressing what was going on, it came across as tone deaf and it was all kind of off-putting. And so a lot of what we did, and so I work very closely with Kevin Rogers at Copy Chief I'm their CMO at Copy Chief. And what we did and what we advised a lot of the copywriters who are working with clients to do is all it takes is like one line or one paragraph where you just acknowledge what's going on. So what we did at Copy Chief is when we were selling our normal offers, we would use this sense of community that we have, because we have this community forum and this training community, and say, now more than ever, it's important to have a community at your back. And so just by adding that one line, we could use the same sales messaging, but we were bringing people into what was going on right now. And so a lot of the clients that I worked with, we would just advise them like, okay, we don't have to change everything, but let's make sure we're not being tone deaf. Let's make sure that we're addressing what's going on right now, so people know that we're on top of it and that we've got our finger on the pulse. And that was really it. It's like just one line. Don't be lazy with it.
Don't just ignore it entirely. Well, and I actually have a personal question I want to ask about that as a writer. So, oftentimes we're writing something where we mention like, if you're a copywriter, you can take time off and go play golf or do this or do that. And, we're all kind of like, oh, should we not mention golfing? Should we not mention travel? That kind of stuff. And to me, I feel like, this seems like a temporary thing, and everybody looks at it as a temporary thing that will be over, and we will be traveling and we will be golfing and doing all those things.
Exactly.
So should we avoid talking about those things at all and replace them with something else? Or do you think it's okay as long as you're acknowledging it?
I think it's okay as long as you're acknowledging it, because everyone's situation is so different too, right? For example, I'm in Florida. I think you're in Florida too, right, Bonnie?
I'm in Oregon.
Oh, you're in Oregon. Okay. That's like a totally different then. Okay. So I'm in Florida, and like right now, for months now, there's some inconveniences, like you have to wear your mask when you go sit down at a restaurant and stuff, but it's basically been business as usual here for months. And so everyone here is golfing and out on the boats and everything like that. But you go somewhere like San Francisco and it's been super shut down and super closed down, or New York or New Hampshire, they've been completely closed. And so that would come across as tone deaf there. So I think it's just calling out the truth, saying, look, this is temporary and we're all going to go back to normal, hopefully. And just talking about what you said, it just make sure that you're acknowledging it and stating straight out that you understand. And that's why we're talking about this in this frame, this topic in this frame. I think that's the best thing you can do.
Okay. I agree. Yeah. I like that answer.
I mean, because I'm already like Googling like, okay, where can I go as an American during the pandemic? Because I want to travel, right? I can't be the only one.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, as a traveler too, like I'm already thinking forward to where I'm going to be going once things open up and what, you know, the possibilities for working abroad then. And so it's not like it's never going to be on our radar again. It's just that we have to be careful about how we say it.
Yeah. And you have this on your mind. And so I think it's just about having the conversation that's on people's mind at that time. So for example, people want to travel. And so you could write about that, be like, are looking to travel, but frustrated with the lockdowns. Here's a way to get that travel experience without jumping on a plane across seas or something like that, right? Like you write about what people are thinking about right now and just talk about it. Talk about what's on people's minds.
I love that. Just acknowledge it. Yeah. So I have another question for you, and then we have some questions that have come in as we've gone. Sure. I'll ask you those. So you working in funnels, again, you've been doing this for a while. You had an agency, so you're like a few steps away from, you know, where you were as a beginner by now. But so how important is it for beginner copywriters to understand like the marketing that goes into this stuff and how things like sales funnels work? Is that something all copywriters should be aware of, or just if they want to like start consulting and start an agency or do something like that?
That's a great question. And so I coach a lot of copywriters as well inside Copy Chief. And this is something that we talk about a lot because people get really bogged down with what we call future problems. So we've got this awesome tool, which I would be glad to share in the comments here. It's called the Freelancer's Journey Timeline. And it's basically if from the first time you ever discover your love of the craft, whether it's copywriting or content marketing, to the time you're building this giant legacy business, which will last for generations, there's a clear timeline. And there's what we say there's 7 phases there. And so I think it's about making sure that you're dealing with the challenges and the skills that you need right now in your current phase. And so if you're just discovering your love of the craft and you're just learning about like how persuasive copy works and stuff, you don't need to be worried about split testing various ad headlines or like how to use content networks like Taboola and Outbrain, right? You just need to learn how to write a persuasive sales message. But if you're just gotten your first few clients and you want to start expanding and like going into consulting more, then you want to understand the big picture, because even though you may not specialize in all the pieces, like you may not need to know how to set up a Facebook ad campaign or how to analyze the email stats. You at least need to understand how it all works together so that you can have those conversations with your clients. And so I think it's about understanding where you are in your journey as a freelancer and a marketer, and then knowing what's a right now problem to solve and what are the gaps in your knowledge right now and what's a future problem that is important but not for right now to understand.
Okay, so focus on persuasive writing first. Get that part down and then go to the next step from there.
Definitely. Yeah. Focus on the craft first, practice your craft, even for free at first, just to like get some reps in. And then of course you want to make sure you get paid, because something changes in you when you finally get paid for your writing skills. It like becomes a whole new game. And so you don't want to keep writing for free because it's good practice after a couple of reps, right? You want to get paid and like up the stakes a little bit for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the main goal here after all.
Yeah.
Like get paid for it.
Definitely.
So we've had a couple of questions come in.
Sure.
Wendy was asking, this goes back to when we were talking about asking your client, you know, what they did before. If you're writing a sales funnel for somebody and you're asking them, what have you done in the past? So how do you reply if they say it doesn't matter what we did before, or we want to see what you do, or they just don't want to give you what they did previously?
Right. Okay. This is a really good question. And I think there's 2 parts to this, right? So first of all, if you're working with a client who doesn't want to give you what they did before, I would argue that maybe that's not a great client to work with. And so you need to decide if you're going to be the one to educate them on how to work with a copywriter, or why that needs to happen. Or if you're going to find someone who just understands that, hey, marketing requires information to work. So if you're willing to sit down, and that can be a big project to educate someone about how marketing works and why you need that information. But if you're willing to do that, I would explain that this is what helps us make better and better choices. Knowing what worked and didn't work in the past serves as a launch pad so that we can do better going forward. And if they understand that and they're willing to listen to that, I think most people would be pretty open. I've never had anyone tell me, no, I don't want to show you. I will say that people say that if something didn't work in the past, they're like, oh, I don't want you to look at it because it didn't do well. And I would still push them and be like, okay, great. Let me look at it so I make sure that we don't do that again, make those same mistakes again.
Yeah. So I guess at that point, you're just determining how much work you're having to do to educate the client and whether or not it's worth it to you in the end.
Yeah. And that just depends on you setting your standard for what qualifies a client as a good fit for you, right? So for me, I'm not interested in helping anyone launch their business from scratch. I just, where I'm at in my life now, like that's way too much work for me. I only want to work with people who have an established business and a product that's proven to convert, and I will bring lots more sales to that world. I don't want someone to help someone invent their brand new thing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I just had one other question come in. It's a personal question from Marcy. Her teenage daughter is going into journalism. Is copywriting a good field to go into? She had an addition here. She's in virtual school, last year of high school.
Yep. That is a great question. This is a very personal answer. So I am not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV. But, I personally think that if you're going to go into journalism, if you want to make money, go into copywriting instead. I mean, the world needs journalists, and that's a very important job, right? But you can use those same skills and write copy and vice versa. But if you're going into journalism, I feel like it's a field that is turning more into a marketing field anyway. So very rarely do you ever see a journalistic story that doesn't have some sort of leaning or is trying to persuade you to think in one way or another. And that's copywriting. So I would say, even if you want to be a journalist, still study copywriting. But if you want to be a copywriter, then journalism is not going to help you, because you need to learn those persuasive strategies for writing in a way that gets people to think how you are trying to get them to think, right?
Yeah, they're two very different things. You're not supposed to sway people in journalism.
Exactly. So. And in terms of a profitable career, I mean, copywriting, when we talk about that bottom of the funnel content, that's what's closest to the sale. So copywriting is a great field to go into if you want to be a writer who makes money, because you're tied closely to the money. You can point exactly to what you wrote and say, this made money, and there's it's irrefutable proof that your work brought in money. And so that's why I'm a big fan of copywriting over journalism as a career.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to add to that too, that, like when I was in college, and maybe your daughter is in this situation, I don't know, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew I liked art, and I liked writing, and I liked to be creative. So I thought about journalism as an option, but this turns out to be a much better fit for me. So I would say just depending on who your daughter is, and if she's like bent on sharing news with the world, then journalism definitely. But she just is a creative person who likes to write, then copywriting can be a great field. There's so many different ways you can do it. So
absolutely. And I think people have this misconception of copywriting that it's all salesy stuff, but a lot of it is story. If you like writing stories and you want to tell stories, copywriting is a great field to go into, because that's what works. That's what connects with people. Yeah,
exactly. There is one more question that came in.
Sure.
But I don't see it here. Somebody notified me elsewhere.
No worries.
EJ was asking so with the client, we were just talking about, making sure that you train your client and stuff like that. And she said, how do you keep them satisfied without scope creep? And if you guys listening aren't sure what scope creep is, that's just, when you end up doing way more for your client than you originally had sort of talked about doing.
So how do you make sure you're delivering what you promised without allowing them to ask for more without changing the agreement, right? So that's just it, is getting really clear about the scope right up front. And so a lot of times so I'm assuming what they're talking about is either they've agreed to a project and now they want to add more pieces of copy onto the project, or they're on a retainer, which is where you get paid every single month for a certain amount of work or for showing up for a certain amount of time. And probably more hours worth of work is being added on to what they originally agreed. So this is just about getting really clear about the scope up front. So instead of saying like, okay, you pay me $3,000 or whatever it is a month, and I'll write copy for you. You say, okay, so it's going to be $3,000 a month. And for that, you're going to get X email, X number of emails, X number of Facebook ads, X number of blog posts, whatever it is. It's getting really clear and putting a measurable amount on the copy that you're producing. And so, or you can do it by the hour. I personally don't like to charge by the hour because I always say it's not fair to my clients that they get paid for the thoughts that I have or that they pay for the thoughts I have in the shower, right? Because like you're always coming up with ideas. It's hard to measure that. But if you are doing an hourly rate, then you say like, okay, this covers 5 hours of work per week. That's equivalent to 1 day per week. And so you get me for a full day every single week. And if it goes beyond that, then we need to readjust the scope. And so it's just clearly defining it. And you may, if you've already had some scope creep, you may have to have that kind of come to Jesus moment with your client and say like, okay, this has been great. I'm so excited to work with you. This has been great so far. We have gone beyond the scope of our original agreement. Let's take a look at what your copy needs are to make sure that our original agreement still meets what you need. And you just make it all about them.
Yeah, that's great. I have 2 more questions that came in. Are you okay? A couple more?
Yeah, I've got time.
Okay, awesome. So Robert was asking, how long does one have to work for free when starting out? How do I know I'm ready to start charging?
So I would say that you don't ever have to work for free. Like you could, as long as you feel that you can deliver a great piece of copy, then you don't have to work for free. But it is a great way to practice your skills because it gives you something tangible to write about, right? Sometimes the hardest way to practice the hardest thing about practicing is you don't know what to write about because it's really hard to write about yourself and your own service. So just choosing some sort of product out there. Maybe it's something you use every day. Maybe it's like selling an iPhone or what Agora does. The Agora publishing companies is a lot of times when you pitch to become an Agora writer, they have you sell them a book. So like you like write about a book and like why you should read this book. And so just choosing one product. And once you've got a couple of samples and you feel really good about those samples, and you can use communities like AWAI and Copy Chief to get feedback on your samples to make sure they're really solid, then absolutely you should start charging. I don't believe in working for free. I do believe that sometimes you don't get paid for writing because there's an amazing opportunity or learning opportunity. But there's got to be some sort of trade for your writing. Whether it's an opportunity or learning or hopefully money. You don't ever want to work just because for the sake of working for free.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, one more question. This is a very beginner question. Dorcas is asking, what would you advise a beginning copywriter looking to start taking on clients? Where's the best place to start? Very general.
I think that's great. It's general. And so I would say get more specific. So I would start thinking about who you want to write for. So the problem is when you're saying like, let's go find clients, it's like so overwhelming because there's clients everywhere. And what new copywriters never believe when I say this is there's so much work. I get approached almost every single day of every week with people asking me to send them copywriters. And so there's so much work out there. The thing is, you need to know who you're looking for. So I would start getting more specific about what you want to write about. Because, for example, my boyfriend writes for Legacy Research, which is one of the Agora financial in the Agora financial family, and they write financial copy. And I have zero interest in writing financial copy. Like I do not want to do it. I don't want to read about it. I don't want to research it. And so to me, I would never go look for a financial client, right? I like health. I like survival stuff. I like entertainment stuff. I like lifestyle stuff. So for me, I'm trying to narrow down the field of where my ideal clients would be. So I would get really clear about what you want to write about and then what type of people you want to work with. So do you want to work with business owners looking for emails, or do you want to write for Facebook ads, or do you want to write blog posts? So what kind of writing do you want to do? If you're writing for Facebook ads, it's like super short but it's got to like you've got to pack a lot of persuasive punch into a couple of lines, right?
Yeah.
Where in a blog or an advertorial, which is like a blog style sales page, you're going to have a lot more room to tell stories and things like that. So it just depends on what kind of writing you want to do and what you want to write about. So I would get really clear on that. And that's going to help you narrow your search, because you're going to be able to go places like LinkedIn or conferences where these kinds of people hang out and know that, okay, this is where these people hang out. So I can just put myself in their path now as a copywriter to help them.
Well, Rachel, this has been so great. Thank you so much. I feel like you have just dropped all kinds of information bombs on us. Can I send people to your podcast?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. We talk about this stuff and finding clients on there all the time.
Great. So it's at businessofwritingpodcast.com. You can get more of Rachel there, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show at some point in the future. It's great to have you. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me here. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye. Talk to you soon.